Hello and welcome to Psychology in Seattle. I'm your host, Kirk Honda, licensed therapist and professor. Today on the podcast, I have two very special guests, Jessamy Flynn and Jamie Bilodeau. Silent T, silent A, U, and X. Anyway, Jamie Bilodeau. They were students in a course that I taught last quarter titled Family of Origin Systems. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you.
Jinx. I thought I would have them on the podcast to talk about their experiences of their first quarter in graduate school as therapists in training. I'm very interested in hearing what their experiences were like. But before we go into that, let's get some background on the two of you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What would you like to share with Podcast Land?
I'm Jessamy, and I grew up in Northern California, a small town called Eureka.
Oh, yeah.
You know of it?
Yeah, isn't it right on I-5?
101.
Oh, 101. Okay, so I've been through it then.
Yeah, right on the coast. And now I live in Seattle, and I like to salsa dance.
Where do you like to salsa dance?
Salsa con todo?
Where's that?
Fremont.
What do you like about it?
I like that it doesn't get too hot.
Because hot dancing means sweaty dancing, which means gross dancing.
Which means gross dancing.
Is that gross for you or gross because the guys are super sweaty?
Gross because the guys are super sweaty. I don't get super sweaty. I get to wear dresses, but these men, the poor things, have to wear like jeans and like they wear button downs, and I don't know why.
Yeah. It's so funny because you said, "Oh, it's because it doesn't get hot." I immediately, thought, "Oh, because she doesn't want to get sweaty." But then I thought, actually, it's probably the guys.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good.
So you want it to be cool so the guys don't sweat like pigs.
Because sometimes you have to put your hands on people when you dance.
Yeah, and you don't want to feel soggy afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so often that's the case.
Yeah. I imagine even in cool rooms, guys can get sweaty because that's a lot of work. Salsa dancing is a lot of work for guys. It's a workout.
Yes. It's a lot of physical work and a lot of mental work.
So I can imagine sweat is part and parcel for the...
That's not how I thought the podcast would go.
So tell us about yourself, Jamie.
I'm from Tri-Cities, which is Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
And I went to school at Gonzaga in Spokane.
Okay.
And so after that, I moved to Seattle. I've been in Seattle for like 6 years.
Okay. My family is from Spokane. Both sides. My parents met at Lewis and Clark, which is near Gonzaga. Mm-hmm. And what do you do for fun?
Good question. I have a cat.
Okay. That's fun.
My cat's fun. What else? School
and cat. That's pretty much
That's
me too.
sad, but it's okay.
Simple pleasures.
All right. So let me ask you guys, why did you choose to become a therapist? I'm curious.
That's a great question. Previous to school, I was working at a therapeutic childcare center for 6 years called Child Haven. I've always wanted to go back to school, and I started working with that population to just see kind of what it would be like to work with kids and families. And I found myself really interested in the work I was doing with the infants specifically, but really wanted to make more of an impact on the whole family than just helping the child. Because I worked with the parents, but it really is important, I think, to change the whole system, which is why I found it exciting to try to do like family systems work. So in finding Antioch in the marriage and family therapy program, I thought that would be a really great fit just because it works with the whole family and not just one person. I think from my own experience too, individual therapy is great, but it's really hard to make a change within the whole system when you're yourself just doing the work,
Yeah. Why did you want to be a therapist, Jessamy?
When I moved to Washington in my last year, or right before my last year of high school began, my stepmom thought it would be beneficial for me to see a therapist, so she took me to see the therapist that she was going to, named Mary Blackburn. And that was wonderful. I'd never talked about things or examined my relationships in that way, and I found it really beneficial. And I wanted to be able to help people like Mary had helped my family and me. So I finished up my last year of high school in hopes of becoming a counselor and majored in psychology and tried to test myself to figure out if I could actually handle the job. And the opportunities I had to test myself were becoming an RA. So not really, not really that applicable. But then I became an advocate at an agency in Bellingham called Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Services of Whatcom County. And that was a bit more of a test.
Yeah.
It's where I learned that I also, like Jamie, wanted to be able to do something more, to be involved in the people's lives that I was working with in a different way, because so often I feel that the community doesn't have everything that a person needs, and as an advocate, I wasn't feeling like I could help them in the ways I wish I could have helped them.
So you knew you wanted to be a therapist in high school.
Yeah.
And it had to do with you being in therapy and seeing how it could help you. And you thought, wow, maybe I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you were a psych major in your bachelor's. Mm-hmm. Where'd you go to school? Western?
Western.
Okay. Here in Washington State. And then you decided to test yourself by being a resident advisor.
Yeah, that's right.
In a dorm. Which dorm?
I was a resident advisor in Nash Hall.
That's funny. My sister was in Nash Hall many years ago.
I adore that. Everything about Nash. I adore it.
Yeah. And being a resident advisor is kind of like being a therapist, kind of like being a big brother, big sister, kind of like being a police officer.
Hopefully not like a police officer.
Well, you're the person that, might say to somebody, hey, you need to keep it down, or you need to put your clothes back on, or
oh my gosh,
you need to vomit in the toilet, not in the hall.
I never got one of those.
Oh, okay. Was it an all-girl floor?
No, well, mine was. Mine was an all-girl floor, and then it alternated every other floor. And the most fun one I got was at 4:00 in the morning. Someone had just emptied an entire fire extinguisher, throughout the hall, and that was fun.
Yeah.
Set off all the alarms, and
yeah,
it was a good time.
Yeah. So then after graduating, you worked for a domestic violence agency.
Actually, during my last year of college, that's when I worked or volunteered with them.
Volunteered. Mm-hmm. As a bachelor level counselor to victims?
Advocate.
Yeah,
I wasn't taught counseling skills. For some reason, that's a distinction that they like to make.
So someone might come into your agency having been recently a victim or an ongoing victim of domestic violence, and you're there to advocate for them and say, you have rights, the law is on your side, here are some people you can talk to.
And we would write a lot of protection orders for them, or with them, I should say.
Would you work with the victim to try to pump up their self-esteem and self-efficacy and power personally, or is that the therapist's job?
I think the ways in which we did that was mostly just believing people and affirming their experience, which I was surprised to hear that so many people did not like to do for these survivors.
Right. Not only just people in general, but sometimes police officers.
Oh, yeah.
Will say,
we have good police officers in Bellingham, but sometimes survivors would still feel like they had not been heard or feel like they had not been believed.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It happens all the time. Mm-hmm. So I am curious about your experience of your first quarter at Antioch, not only in the class that you were a student in with me in Family of Origin, but also just in general. You've come a long way. You've applied. You're finally here, and I'm just curious as to what your experience was like in your first quarter.
Yeah, I'd say it was definitely challenging in ways that I wasn't necessarily expecting. It sounds kind of funny. It's like I think that I thought going into it, since I'd done some work on myself before, that it might not be as hard in that regards, but it was almost like learning all the material and the concepts brought it to a totally different level than I was expecting, which was really good.
You'd done a lot of personal work and therapy prior to coming to graduate school. So in Family of Origin systems, there's two main things that we do in the class. One is to learn theory, to learn how to use them, learn what they are and how to use them. And the other focus is to learn how to apply them to yourself with the effort of learning about yourself, learning about where you came from, where your family of origin system as a child came from in terms of your grandparents, and how all that leads up to today in terms of your own issues, with the hope of having the students become more aware of themselves so that when they're a therapist and they're working with clients, they are aware of their hot button issues, their unfinished business that might come out with their clients, because it often does, not to get rid of it, but to be aware of it and to not let it blindside us, because when it blindsides us, that's when it becomes worse than when it doesn't. For instance, say if you have an issue with criticism from your childhood and a client criticizes you, if you're not aware of that vulnerability or you haven't wrestled with it to some extent, you might become very hostile with the client and write that person off and say, well, that client, da, 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 da. Whereas if you are aware of yourself and say, oh, that's my hot button issue, they're criticizing me, I know that this is an issue for me, I'm having a visceral reaction, I have an urge to be hostile with this client. But since I've done a lot of personal work in family of origin and other classes and just in therapy and consultation, I am going to try to figure this out. I'm going to table these feelings for right now. I'll finish the session, then I'll go consult and think about it, and I'll think, okay, that's right. And I can come back to a compassionate place with that client. So that's just one of the millions of examples that might happen, and family of origin is along those lines. So you're saying that when you were learning those concepts, it was a new angle at self-discovery. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting. You almost have to, in order to learn the concepts, put yourself aside in a way to be able to apply it. But then you realize all the things that you're doing. So it's really interesting because you start becoming so aware of all the things that you do. But I also thought one of the biggest things was just looking at the family. So the way the progression worked was looking at the family and all those kinds of things, and then looking towards your own stuff. And so for me, it's brought a lot of compassion towards my family and just looking at how that evolved for them. And then also looking at some of the things that I do that are exactly the same almost as what they do. And it's when it's yourself, it's oh, that's me doing that. And so it's then when you look at your family doing those things, it's I can see where that came from now. And it makes more sense. So I can be more compassionate towards that versus getting upset or blaming or whatever, because I know why maybe that happened. It's a transgenerational pattern or whatever. So it's very interesting to look at that progression. At least it's been really helpful, I think, for me.
Yeah, it's such a multifaceted thing when you talk about that. I think of so many different things, one of which is the wisdom that comes from being able to understand the other side of the story. When we're growing up and when we have our complaints about our family, we see obviously our side. And when you go through this class and maybe other work that you've done, you begin to see it from the other side, from the side of your parents. When you investigate their childhoods and what they went through, you begin to see the seeds of maybe some of the issues that they had and how that played a role in the family system that they created. Not that it lets them off the hook per se, but it just puts it into a context and helps us to understand why people do the things that they do. In our society, we tend to look at people as either sick or evil. If they're doing something bad that we don't like, there's something wrong with that person. There's something evil about them. But when we start looking at people more closely, a more helpful and I think more accurate perspective is that people are, a part of a system. They're a part of a society. They're a part of a history. And they have issues as a part of that. It doesn't let them off the hook from having responsibility for their actions, but it helps to understand them a little better. And being a therapist, that's a huge part of being a therapist, is being able to understand where people come from. And from there, not only compassion can take place for people that traditionally are, sort of vilified, but also we have the beginnings for how to help them. If we know what sort of context contributed to their issues, we know how to help them. So, Jessamy, what was your experience like in first quarter?
I was surprised because I was the youngest one, it seemed, in all of my classes. So it felt like I was just drawing on the wisdom of everybody that was older than me, which was cool in a way, but also it was like, I don't know what I'm doing here.
It's interesting. I didn't know you were the youngest one.
Yeah, I'm just a baby. I'm like 22 years old.
Are there any other? I think there are.
There's one other, I think, in our family of origins class.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, one other baby.
Mostly everyone is 30 to 40, I'm guessing.
I haven't asked everybody's
25
ages.
to 40?
25 to 40,
Yeah.
It made me feel like, okay, I must be in a good program. So, and I felt very supported by people that were older than me. Felt very accepted by them, especially in the food class. Family of origins class.
Well, you didn't seem young, if that makes any sense. I mean, you were a leader in class and maternal often.
I think it was a good environment for those traits to come out in me because I did feel so supported and did feel so comfortable. As far as the workload, like Jamie was saying, it was very overwhelming. I'm working full time. I've never really worked full time before, just mostly part-time jobs in school. So I would not do any schoolwork during the weekdays, and then I would just get everything done on Saturday, which isn't the best way to do things, but is what I had time to do with that class schedule. So there was that adjusting, like trying to find balance.
How many classes were you taking?
Just 2.
Okay. Family of origin and
Systems.
okay.
Yeah.
Were you taking systems too?
Yeah, we were in the same class.
Yeah.
So your experience was a lot of work. You were working full time, which is difficult to do and take classes, but people do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were doing a lot of studying on Saturday. And what else was your experience like?
Well, I got a family out of it. That was nice. The family of origins family is what we call ourselves. I feel like I have people in my life now that I will have for a very long time in my life and that I enjoy spending time with and bouncing ideas off of and engaging in parallel self-discovery with.
Yeah, you guys really formed a good group that was supportive and there for each other and likes to socialize together. And it was really nice to see that because as far as I know, nobody knew each other before coming into class. Mm-mm. And there are 16 of you and it felt even in, I don't know, early, like week 3, when we were in that weird classroom, remember when they kicked us?
Yes.
I just remember feeling like, oh, this group feels like it's coming together somehow, like the people are gelling well and supporting each other, and there's a good vibe to this group. So
yeah, we all had. I was so nervous in the beginning to get a consultant because I thought it was going to be this process. Like, oh my goodness, we all have to like pick each other like dodgeball. Like, and someone's going to be left out. It's going to be a mess, and it's going to be horrible. But I say all that to say I could have been a consultant, a partner with anybody in that class, and
felt good about it.
And felt very good about it.
Yeah. Right. One of the things that we do in the class is you pair up with someone early in the quarter, and pretty much every class meeting, you will talk amongst yourselves with your partner and share everything that you've done over that week, which has to do with a lot of personal investigation and writing about your own issues and, thinking about your own family and very vulnerable information that you've done in these assignments. And you're sharing that potentially all with your consultant. And you get to know each other in a way that other people might not ever know you in some ways. And it's, supportive and you learn from each other. And so I will have during the first class meeting, we'll mention it to people and say, think about who you want to pair up with. But inevitably what happens is it pretty much just comes down to who you happen to sit with during the second meeting when I ask you guys to pair up with somebody. So it's hard to, it's like in some ways I want people to choose someone that they want to work with. But on the other level, it's like, well, how do you do that? And it's
we
like,
didn't even hardly know each other.
Yeah.
Right. So to some extent, it becomes kind of random. But if everyone is participating well and well-meaning, it usually works out for the best. And sometimes odd matches are very interesting. You know what I mean? People that wouldn't normally befriend each other end up befriending each other and becoming very close over the span of the quarter. So what was your experience like with your consultant, Jamie?
It was pretty cool because I think right from the first week, it was like, I can't remember which exercise we had, but it was something, the genogram, I think. So it was like, we had all this family history details, and it was just like, okay, share your like genogram. And initially I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know how I can talk about this. And it was just like, well, just do it. And it didn't feel super weird because, I think, like you said, everyone in our class is so nice and honest and compassionate that it was just like, this is what you do. And so I think right from the very beginning meeting, just sharing all that stuff, it made me feel like I had a safe person in the class to like share with, which was really nice to get to like know you'd go every week and like have someone that you felt comfortable sharing with. So that was pretty cool. And then I like also, I think you mentioned it one of the weeks, I had found someone in the class too that was like really helpful for me to like talk with like every day just about all the things that were going on, just because like I have friends outside of the program, but they have no idea what it's like to be in that specific program. So it's really hard to understand what I'm talking about when I talk about projective identification. They'd be like, what? So it was really helpful to have someone within the class that I felt like I could just say anything all the time about how I was going crazy writing my paper or whatever. So I found that to be really helpful. I tend to work better with like a one-on-one type of a scenario, so it was really helpful for me to just have someone that I could trust and bounce things off of. I wish I had gotten closer to the whole class like earlier on, because I think I would have felt more able to like express things, because I do work better, like I said, one-on-one. But it was nice how we did do some things socially together to kind of break the barriers and break the ice somewhat. So it was like,
we can actually be friends.
Yeah, like we all have really similar things in common, and yeah, it was cool how to like watch the progression over the quarter.
Yeah, it was nice to see. Were you referring to when I was talking in class about having someone to talk to every day?
Yeah. So it was funny because I'd been doing that. Like, I don't even know how it happened, but it was just kind of like, I think it's helpful too when you have people in your classes that you have several classes with. So it was like I had my consultant who I had in several classes, but then I also had Beth, who was in our class that I was in a couple classes with, and I had just like started texting her about random things or using that Gmail chat thing, which is really cool. And it was just like I just started like communicating, and it was like feels
the
nice.
The Antioch Gmail chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like the Hangouts thing or whatever. It was just helpful to have someone to talk to about things, to just kind of like let it go and move on in order. Because it's so, I like worry about things or like ruminate about things, and it's like if you don't have someone you can just talk to about it, you just like I don't know, it's interesting.
Well, I'm really glad you're saying that, because that is a very important thing to me as a professor, that students don't let those questions simmer or stew, that they ask them, and of someone, particularly me, because those are often questions that are easily answered by me, one, and two, even if I don't answer them that well, it can really get people unstuck. Yeah. When you have a simple question like, how do you reference blank, it can really halt the learning process, because you're stuck on this idea. And being able to ask other students, like even things like, the thing I said in class, was that stupid?
Yep.
And to hear them say, yeah, kind of, but who cares? Or no, it wasn't stupid, or whatever. Just kind of like a check-in with another human being, just to get that perspective. That check-in with someone else is extremely important and so helpful. And without that, learning, like I said, comes to a halt. People get really bogged down in these easily answered questions.
I relied on my therapist a lot. I wish I would have talked to people in the class a lot more, a lot earlier. I was not proactive like that. But my therapist was very, very helpful to me throughout the program.
Yeah, I'm interested. Sometimes I wonder if therapists hate me because, the students are in therapy often, and we require it. So they're often in therapy when when they're in my family of origin class. And I'm always wondering, I wonder what their therapists are thinking about what I'm having the students do, because it's quite related to therapy and can potentially mess up a treatment plan that a therapist might have for that client. So I'm curious, did your therapist say anything about that?
She thought everything that I was writing about and reflecting on was very helpful. I think our relationship was, I would freak out about something that I was learning in class, or I would be processing, is a better way to say it, something that I was learning about myself or about my family in class, and then I would just take it to her, and we would go off of that. I felt like she was just letting a treatment plan happen organically through whatever I threw at her, but maybe not. Maybe she had the treatment plan all along. I don't know.
Did you accelerate in your therapy at all?
Oh, yes. I've had, it'll be 3 therapists now. I've never been able to just throw myself into therapy and be so honest and have so much material at the forefront of my mind, or be in such a place where I can really be honest with myself as much as I have been, as when I have been taking this class and learning all the things that I have been.
Yeah, it seems like it would accelerate things, because every week, especially for the first 7 or 8 weeks, I have some pretty intense assignments that you do.
Yeah, you do.
I know. Normally, you would just write a couple papers and that would be that, but I don't like to do things that way for a number of reasons. But I have people from week 1 doing assignments every week, and it keeps people focused on the class. There's no week except for maybe the last week where you could just say, I don't have any family of origin homework to do this week, so I'm going to concentrate on other things. There's really no point in the quarter that's really like that, And like I said, most other classes, there's probably several weeks where you could just be like, I'm not going to do anything in that class, or I'm not going to focus on it that much. But anyway, every assignment has to do with you and your history and your issues and your family and your parents and your current relationships and everything from how you love each other to issues that you experienced as painful as a child. And you are reading material and you're applying it, and I'm seeing you do all this work, and I'm just thinking, man, this is a lot of intense personal work that these people are doing. And normally when you're in therapy, you go to therapy, you go home. But in this instance, you're spending, maybe your entire Saturday investigating yourself and doing a lot of personal work. And it just makes sense that it would accelerate therapy just based on that alone.
I've never been a procrastinator before, but the emotional aspect of this work made me really resist it for a long time. I'm like, I don't want to go there. My feelings don't want to go there right now. So I think that might have also been why I saved it all for one day, because I just had to get it done.
So normally with schoolwork, you get it done right away and don't procrastinate. But with this, because of how intense the emotions were when you were doing the assignments, you would put it off, or would you, another way of putting it might be, you have to wait until you have the time and the space to really go into it. Like a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night for an hour isn't enough time to really go into it.
Yes. So I would normally just work on things little by little and get them done. But for some reason, because of whatever issues I might have, I was really forced to confront a lot of my past and a lot of my issues. And I just didn't want to have to do that little by little. I just wanted to get it all done in one fell swoop. And so that's how I worked.
Yeah. What else was it like in class? Any specific moments that pop out to you in family of origin?
So there was a moment, I'm going to cry.
I don't even know if I have a tissue.
I don't have tissue.
I have tissue.
It's so funny now, now I'll announce, before I'm going to cry.
Emotion.
I think I'm going to cry. And it's very straightforward usually. I think I'm going to cry. Someone help me get the tools to help me cry, like a tissue.
Help, please.
Thanks.
That's good. I like that.
I did it with my mom, and I think it surprised her.
She's
we were just in the car just talking about something. I was like, Mom, I'm going to cry. She's like,
Just for the warning.
Well, when you remember the moment, it's emotional for you, as it is for me. I tear up a little bit when I think about it too.
Do you want a tissue?
Yeah.
There's a moment where Christy was talking to a man in our class about all the things that she would want to say to her biological father. And it was just heartbreaking because I felt like it was amazing and to see that type of vulnerability. And I was really honored. Like, I was just blown away, like, in the moment that I was getting to witness something like this. And just thought she was so brave, not because she had anything to prove to us or anything that she'd be scared about talking about, but just so brave to even face those things and say those things that she was saying. So I just felt very connected to her in those moments.
In that moment when Christy was talking to another student, but he was playing the role of her father, and so she was saying everything she wanted to say to him.
Yeah.
It was incredibly powerful for me as well, and I was right next to her and was just blown away by what she was doing, and she just seemed so vulnerable but confident at the same time.
It was really beautiful.
Yeah, and Jessamy, you were sitting in a way that you were facing Christy as she was talking. I mean, you were right over his shoulder, and you were right over his shoulder to me too. I could see you as well, and I could see you crying.
It's me just losing it, yeah.
But you weren't.
I could see Jamie losing it.
Jamie, you were right behind me, so I couldn't see you. But Jessamy, I knew you weren't losing it that wouldn't be the word I was using. You were feeling it. And you were, now I'm going to cry more, but you were in the moment. You know, Christy was having a moment, and you were with her in that, and it was real. And there was no way around that. And to have any other reaction, honestly, would have been distancing or trying to get away or something, which would have been totally your right to do. But it was a very intense thing, and to some extent, given your role in the class, it made total sense that you were the person who responded to Christy.
Yeah, thanks for giving me the space to do that.
Right. So I asked the class if anyone wanted to say anything to Christy. That wouldn't be a normal thing that I would do in that moment, but it just felt like it had to be done. And you stepped forward in a really leadership, compassionate, maternal, caring position to be, and just said it beautifully to her in a way that I don't think anybody else could have. I mean, the things you were saying to her about, I don't even remember what you were saying, but yeah, I just remember it was perfect.
Yeah, I think we got a lot closer that night.
Right. Yeah, it felt like something had happened. What was your observation of that moment? What was your experience?
It was very, raw and vulnerable and beautiful in a way. I mean, it was amazing to watch that exercise, but it was amazing to see one of our peers being so open and honest and being able to have everyone watch that and witness that and be with her. So that was awesome. And then I think for me, it brought up a lot of the countertransference stuff that we've been talking about in the class. So I was responding to what she was saying and like relating, I feel like, in a compassionate way, but then also it was just bringing up a lot of stuff for me and my own stuff. So I think I was having like reactions on multiple levels. So that felt really intense, I guess.
Yeah.
But good. And then we did the empty chair in our head after that, and that was really hard too.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was very fitting for that night.
Right. So I walked everyone through an exercise where I had them close their eyes and relax and imagine whomever they wanted to imagine sitting across from them in a chair. And then when they opened their eyes, the students, I had them open their eyes, and normally in therapy you would have them actually talk to the empty chair, but instead everyone wrote down what they wanted to say to that person. Usually people would choose someone in their family, someone important to them, that they had a lot on their mind they wanted to get off their chest. And again, everyone doing tremendous work. I don't even know what's happening. I see everyone writing, and a couple of people talked about their experience. The reason for this, again, is to have people learn firsthand what it's like to do therapy and what it feels like to be on that side of things, but also to get to know yourself and your own issues, because there's nothing more revealing than when you do an exercise like that and really get into it and really feel in your body what your unfinished business is. It's like, oh man, I have a lot of emotions. There's one thing just to say, yeah, I have this issue related to my family. Da, da, da. It's another thing to feel it in the moment and just be like, oh my God, I have some serious vulnerability here, as everyone does, and to be real about that. But anyway, so you did that exercise, and what were you saying about that?
Oh, that was really impactful for me, the empty chair exercise. I'd done something similar years ago, but I think it was really interesting to do that. I think it was the day we turned in our paper. Yeah. And so I was like feeling a lot already from that. And so I think it just summed up the night well in just like this really emotional place, but like digging deeper into those feelings rather than like just put them away, yeah. Which I feel like is really important. So that exercise I feel like has been really helpful for me in like moving forward.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it till just now that you spend all quarter going in deeper and deeper, and then just prior to that week, it all culminates in that last paper for you, right? And then we had that meeting that night. And some of you were probably working on the paper right up until the class time, so you're in the midst of it. And then we had that class time. Yeah. Must have been quite a crescendo of emotions for everybody.
Definitely. The first paper was challenging in its own way, but like the second paper to me was what really did it, because it's like your own stuff. It's like the other ones, like you're looking at a lot of your family issues and the patterns and everything, which was hard. But that paper, I don't know, something about it. Yeah. So I felt like that was the point in the quarter that was just really, everything kind of hit. And I think that's what I really made me aware of what I need to look at more to be able to like move forward. And what I'm like, been looking at all these books to try to get more information on like all those, unfinished business issues. But yeah, I think that particular class was like where everything just hit. Because I was already really emotional from that week, like just dealing with all that. And that's why it was really helpful to have people that I could talk to in that process, because it's just a lot to do on your own.
Yeah.
So I think you have to have people. And it's hard to reach that point where it's like, I don't want to burden someone, but it's like that reciprocal helping relationship that is so helpful and beneficial.
Yeah. And other therapists are perfect for that job because they know what it's like. Sometimes other people don't want to hear us complaining or processing on a daily basis the way that we do. And as I've said in class a few times, we need someone to talk to every day, which seems excessive or burdensome, but really it's not, in my opinion. It's something that is human about us. We need that. We need that check-in or that support or just someone to listen to us on a daily basis. And a lot of people don't have that. And if you depend on your therapist once a week, that's great, but it's not enough.
I guess as long as it's reciprocal, that doesn't seem excessive.
What do you mean?
As long as it's like a give and take checking in, as opposed to just like, let me like tell you everything that's going on in my head and then like.
Unless that is what your relationship is like at that moment, or that's what is needed or something. The reason why I'm being a little oppositional is because there's this idea in our culture and among givers like us that we shouldn't burden other people with our problems. But that is usually not the way that other people experience it. Other people don't. Some people do, but most people don't experience it like, oh, you're burdening me. Most people experience it as...
It's an honor to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels good to help someone. And it's not hard to listen if you know how to do it well. It doesn't require much effort or energy, and it feels good to listen and to help, as we should know. And so when we give other people that opportunity to help us in that way, it benefits everybody. Now, again, it depends, and there are different kinds of relationships, and you don't want to take and take and take if that's what the relationship is like. But if you're going through a particular tough quarter and that one person doesn't have a lot of stress in their life, then it will be a little one-sided. And when you're in graduate school, that's what it's going to be like, particularly when you are in your first couple quarters and when you're in your last few quarters. That's when the stress really is centered around. And you need to burden other people, and you need to call in those favors. You'll give back one day when they go through their things, But for now, you need that support because you're going to go through a lot. Your self-esteem, your emotional issues, your unfinished business need to get out of you and need to be listened to by someone who cares. So that's why I'm a little oppositional about it necessarily being a give and take.
And I'm realizing that it's just my issues it's my countertransference. Is that a correct use of the word? Mm-hmm. It's my countertransference that's making me oppositional to your opposition.
Yeah, meaning that you have that common therapist value of being independent and not depending on other people or not burdening other people.
Yes. To be a burden is very bad.
Right.
It's taken me a long time to get where I am now. It's true. Yeah, it's hard.
Right. Yeah, I hear it from lots of people and in my own head that it's like, I don't want to burden that person. Yeah. But I've never heard anyone say to me, stop burdening me. I've only heard people listen I've only heard people say, well, thanks for telling me that. It's really cool that you told me that. I didn't know that about you or something. Mm-hmm. And then in all likelihood, they will have stuff to talk about from their own life and we can listen to them and it can be reciprocal. What else would you like to say about family of origin? Anything else?
If all teachers are like you, that would be cool.
Oh, really? I thought you were going to say, if all teachers are like you, I'm
dropping out of the... No.
I'm going to need more therapy or something.
Well, I mean, I guess... But that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, right? If all teachers were like you, who pushes as hard as you do, I would need more therapy. Like, I wouldn't necessarily be ashamed of that.
So you experienced me as someone that was challenging you a lot.
Yeah, challenging. But what I was going to say was that I also experienced you as someone who affirmed us as a class and individually a lot. And you really created that safe space for us to explore and to share. Yeah. So from day one, you were like, you're going to feel really inadequate for like the first 10 years of your practice, like starting now. And that was like, great, I do.
Yep.
But that's how it's supposed to be. And then you just continued to like affirm us and encourage us in what we were learning and kind of took us each individually like where we were at.
Thanks for saying that. You're being nice and kind to me.
I'm being honest.
I really feel the insecurity and the pain that everyone goes through in our profession, particularly novice therapists, and feel really bad about it because it just shouldn't be that way, you know. And if only I could convince novice therapists to not feel bad about it. If only I could take that away or a little bit, then I will feel better because there's no reason for any of you to feel insecure or inadequate or bad about your inadequacy or deficient or something. And it's inevitable that you will because it's such an ambiguous career. There's nothing to hold on to. There's no rules. There's no book to just tell you what to do. And there's no way to know what you're doing. There's no way to know if you're doing it well. And so it's incredibly important to me that you let yourself off the hook, particularly in your first quarter. And I've experienced those insecurities myself. And so I know what that feels like. And I wish that more people had said that to me when I was starting out. And so it's based, largely on that. So, yeah, thanks for saying that. It's nice of you to say.
Yeah. Now, in other classes that I go into that maybe have teacher or professors that aren't as sensitive to that area, like I'll just choose to remember what you were saying to us instead of taking whatever.
And I think it's not that they don't care. It's that they might not remember what it was like or something. And that's one thing that I've always really tried to remember is that just because it was a long time since I was in master's school doesn't mean that I will forget what it's like. And I remember being a student myself and just getting the sense that some of the more experienced professors had forgotten what it was like to be completely ignorant of everything and to be extremely afraid and insecure. and almost naturally insecure, because it's like, well, who am I? I just signed up for a program. How do I know I'm going to be a good therapist? What gives me the right to say I can be a therapist? Just because I signed up for a program doesn't mean anything. And so to remember that the greenness of students, and some of my professors, I remember, would teach me the way that they would teach me stuff that they were thinking about at their level of career, having been in the field for 20 or 30 years. And they would speak to me like I was one of them. And I would think, I'm not like you. I have no idea. I have barely security enough to show up to class, and you're telling me about some fringe issue that, like, I'm just freaking out over here, And so I really try to remember that and try to tend to that, because, like I say in class, that insecurity and that anxiety is counter to learning, is counter to growth. And so I tried, and I felt like I really hammered it well this quarter, because I talked about it often. Just me, one time in class, you raised your hand, and I was like, you kind of had this look on your face. I was like, oh no, what she's going to say. And you said, Kirk, you seem like,
I feel like you think all of us are fantastic.
Oh, right.
Is that it?
Yeah, that was it. And I was like, I do. I really do. Yeah, because I was talking about how noble you are to have chosen the career that you have, right? And so, yeah, but anyway.
Oh, it was nice to be able to email questions and get a response. And I felt that from all the professors at Antioch. So I feel like that's really helpful, just to be able to ask things and people respond.
Yeah, and in the traditional way, you would have to show up during office hours to ask questions. And that's a pain in the ass. I mean, to just show up at their particular time and to hope that no one else is in there, and to have to deal with the intimidation of sitting in the professor's office and to have all your questions articulated well. And, whereas it's 2 a.m. and you have a question and you can just shoot me an email, and I might even be up at that and respond. Again, it's at that moment when you need to hear it. You have the question then, because you're working on the assignment then, and you can't wait till next week to have a sit down. You are one of the frequent emailers.
Yep. It's like, because I can.
Because I can.
I was like, it's funny because it's like, it's something that I've kind of learned over the years. It's like, well, I may not be able to ask it in class, but if I have a question, it's okay. It's a question. Mm-hmm. You should be able to ask it, And so it's like one of those things that, kind of like you were saying, it's like I struggle with a little bit. It's like, well, no, I shouldn't, because I should know. And it's like, you know what? No, just ask, and then you get an answer. It's like, there you go. Right.
And it's so relieving to just get an answer, even if it doesn't necessarily make your life all that much better. It's just like, I asked the question and I got an answer. That feels good.
And someone heard me. Yes, that's like huge, I think.
And they didn't say, what's wrong with you that you would ask that question? Yeah. They responded as if it was a good question, like, okay, I'm on the right track here. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. A lot of emails have to do with, am I on the right track? Mm-hmm. A lot of people say, am I on the right track here? And that's great, because if people are going to learn, they need to have that check-in now and then. Mm-hmm. Any advice you have for other applicants or new students?
Don't have a full-time job.
Okay.
Try not to.
How many classes were you taking?
I had 2 classes.
Because it's too much work.
I don't know. It's hard to tell what's too much because because people are so resilient. I think if at all possible, just try to work part-time or not at all. Mm-hmm. Because for me, just because of the emotional vigor of the class, not even just the workload, which was, substantial but handleable, just like you have to give yourself a place to breathe. I think my one complaint is since I was working so much, I wasn't given the chance to really digest some of the things that I was learning as to the extent that I would want to. And I digested a lot, but I, especially in not in the food class, but in the systems class, I wish that I could have delved a lot more into the types of theories we were learning and felt like, and get a handle on them a lot more than I felt I was able to.
Yeah, you mentioned the emotional outlay. A lot of people will they'll figure out their schedule and they'll be like, okay, well, I could work X amount, which will give me X amount of free time to do schoolwork with. But what they don't account for is the emotional energy that is spent. One of the things that happens when we have interns is they will say, well, interning is about a half-time job, maybe a 2/3 job. So I could work, quarter time or something, or half time, and, not ever have a social life or something.
Yeah.
and so it works out time-wise, but the emotional issues of being an intern is so much greater. It feels like 2 full-time jobs being an intern, even though it's really only a half-time job. It feels like a double full-time job, and it blindsides a lot of interns. And so I'm often telling people to take that into consideration. There's something about working with clients for the first time, and you're working with some of the most difficult clients you're ever going to work with some of the most difficult histories, and it's a lot to hold on to. And you need that downtime just to kind of to recover. And if you don't work that into your schedule, you can very quickly become overloaded. So in your first quarter, just to me, you're saying that even though you were only taking 2 courses, working full time, it felt like too much for you.
It felt like a lot.
Yeah.
It felt like a lot, as it should feel.
And if you take less courses or work less, you could have absorbed more.
Yes. I think that I'm not going to say that it's not doable or that I was miserable, because I wasn't, except for the very first couple of weeks. I was like, I don't think this is going to work out. But then I think people, like I said, are very resilient and tend to adjust. But if you can avoid adjusting to something that at first overwhelms you and just not overwhelm yourself in the first place, if that's financially possible, like I say that is a good thing. And it doesn't mean you're lazy. It just means that you have self-care on your mind as a priority.
Any advice to new applicants?
I took 3 classes, but I wasn't working. So slightly different. I was still kind of transitioning from my job and kind of needing to process all of that. Since I'd been there such a long time. And I found 3 classes without working even to still be kind of a lot, just based on the emotional stuff. Because you can plan your time so that you can get everything done, but you can't necessarily plan when you're actually going to be the most productive, because you can't just be like, I'm going to sit and write this. Like, I would have to reflect and think a lot before I could just do it. But it was definitely doable to do the 3. But it was interesting for me taking 3 together, the ones that I did, because I felt like systems and FOO kind of went hand in hand, which was nice, like learning the theories and doing that work. And then it was interesting to take the communications counseling with it, because it was like I felt like I could be applying a little bit of what I was doing, even though I felt like weird to be doing that already. It was like interesting to get to utilize some of what I was learning, so it was kind of cool.
Any other advice that you might have?
I didn't have a therapist, but I feel like that would have been really good. Just because for the family of origins class especially would have been really helpful.
So you're recommending that people
do have one before they start. Yeah, I think that would have been good. And what else? I mean, it's hard to like find a balance until you just can do it. So it's like you just have to do it and figure it out. But trying to be compassionate with yourself, I think that's hard, but it's important.
So making yourself a priority in a way that you might not normally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you said in class, getting enough sleep, was very important because you just can't do this if you don't have enough rest. Like, I don't know, that I made a huge priority, which was hard because that wasn't something that I was used to, but it was like I couldn't maintain the focus to be able to write these papers or do this work without having enough rest. So I definitely get enough sleep.
Because it's stuff that like your brain has been trying to hide from you for like so long. So it gets even better at that when you don't have any sleep.
Yeah, it's just too hard.
Yeah, and I also mentioned in class, I believe, that getting enough sleep is an important thing for a therapist because we sit in a chair and listen to people talk all day, which is very easy to doze off if you were sleep deprived, even just a little bit. Take it from me. So not only is it just good for the soul and the body, but it's also respectful to our clients to be well rested and drink lots of coffee. Just joking. So I'm glad to hear that I'm glad to hear you actually adjusted, because normally when I talk with people about sleep, they nod their head, but they go, but who has time for sleep? I don't have that. I can get by on 5 hours. I'm one of those people. And I always think, well, maybe you're one of those people. Maybe you just have had a lifestyle where it didn't really matter that you were sleep deprived a lot.
Yeah.
Being a therapist, you can't get away with that. It will take a toll, not only just on your soul, but also you'll notice yourself nodding off a lot with clients, and we just can't do that, So you got to be very well rested for that not to happen. Exercise, all those things. And I notice when I don't get enough sleep and when I don't exercise and when I don't eat right, I feel very different when I'm sitting and listening to clients. So.
And the classes are late too, so you have to get enough sleep.
Yeah.
I just got promoted to a position where I get to make my own schedule. So now my latest class is like 6:30. It's gonna be amazing.
Yeah. Our class was from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., which might shock people as it probably should. And I often choose that slot because I feel like it's a challenge to try to keep everyone awake. If you notice, I switch things up quite rapidly. I mean, sometimes I can be a little long-winded, but usually I try to switch from activity to activity, because if it's one thing that students have trained me is that if I don't do that, I start seeing eyes
going to fall asleep,
closing. And So, and plus it's funner that way for me anyway. But any other advice that you have for students?
Just get to know people as soon as you can.
How do they do that, though? I mean, they come, they don't know anybody.
It's funny because I think initially, it's so funny. I mean, I remember seeing people at like orientation and like all the different things, but I think just like making an effort to reach out to people, because I think often people it's like, well, I don't need anyone. I can do this on my own, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, these people are going to be with you for a long time in this program. So I think it's getting over that, like stigma of like, I don't need anyone to help me, or I'm going to be fine on my own, or I have friends, but it's like different. These people will understand what you're going through because they're going to be in it too. So I guess just like making the effort to reach out, because everyone that I've met, like all this, are so nice. Like the population in Antioch, I don't know how that's possible, but everyone's so kind, I think, which is really cool. And everyone's like willing to open up and support you. So I think it's just taking those opportunities.
What do you do to do that? Like email?
Share with them your deepest, darkest secrets on the first day of class.
That would help.
Be vulnerable, like really, really early on.
I don't know. It has to happen like organically.
Because now you guys are like hanging out all the time, it seems.
We're like best friends.
You guys are like having parties and...
I just hung out with Harry last night.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just imagining, say, you're a first quarter student and you don't know anybody and you want to reach out, but you don't want to be creepy and bother anybody. So it's like, how did it evolve with you guys?
I think I just emailed someone a question about something, or
to another
just
student.
Talk to someone, and it just was like, oh, and then it just started. And then, like I said, it's helpful if you have people in different classes, but asking questions I feel like is good. If we had a thing at the beginning of the quarter, that would have been good, I think.
Like a social thing?
Yeah.
We did have the study sessions, though, and that's what really did it for me. Study sessions. We don't have tests. That's hilarious. The editing sessions.
Oh, yeah.
That's just reading people's papers and being, like, floored. Like, okay, I'm going to read about your trauma, and then I'm going to edit this paper, and I'm going to edit your trauma, and... I think that's what really opened up the friendship doors. And
you guys did that as your own thing. Someone must have said, hey, let's get together and have a study session around papers.
I think it was Alicia who invited people over the first time.
Okay.
And then Aaron the second time.
Okay.
And then Harry had a Christmas party.
That's right. It seems as though your group, the 16 of you, were very extroverted with each other and took that upon yourself. Because I can think of other classes where, I mean, definitely people come together, but not in the way that it seemed that you guys did. And it seems like the socializing was a big part of that, which makes total sense. I mean, if you become friends pretty quickly, it changes the vibe of a classroom.
When you find people you can cry in front of, that's something very unique.
Yeah.
You want to capitalize on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I told you guys I'm still friends with some of the people that I went to Antioch with in the 90s and still very close to. And so it's good to have therapist friends, I guess. All right. Anything else?
I guess one thing that just came to mind is, well, within the food class, is letting yourself go there and like dig into those issues rather than like avoiding dealing with the things you don't want to, because it will be very beneficial, because it is really hard. I mean, I think it would be easy to kind of do like a surface level, I'm going to kind of investigate, but I mean, it's just so eye-opening, I think, what you can do and what you can discover, that it's worth it, even though it's really hard.
In class, I think I said, if you wanted to, you could be very surface in this class and you'll pass. And I'll probably not even know, because I won't know what's behind all that. And that's fine. That's your option. If that what feels good to you, that's great. But it could be so much more beneficial to you if you use this opportunity to dive into things that are going to help you. And that will be on you. That will be your motivation. You will have to voluntarily go there, and you don't have to. And you're saying that it really helped to go there.
Yeah. And I think just like one of the biggest things for me over the years is like being able to sit with those really hard feelings. And I think it's easy to want to just like push that away, especially if it's something that's one of your tendencies. But to just really sitting with those feelings that are uncomfortable and hard, and really utilizing the concepts that you learn, applying them to your life and your family and everything, I found it to be really helpful.
Yeah, it's one of the great things about being a therapist is uncomfortable feelings are stock and trade. And being able to sit with those feelings and to feel practiced and competent and supported is a wonderful, liberating experience to some extent. It's like, okay, right now I'm feeling very uncomfortable and I'm feeling very insecure. What's going on for me? And you can talk with your colleagues about it, and you can think about it, and you have all the support around it, and people will welcome those conversations. I imagine in other cultures, other professions, they're not quite as receptive to you saying, you know, Joe in accounting is really touching some of my buttons, and I really just want to sit down and talk for the next hour about what that experience is like. I imagine that some professions really aren't into that, but we certainly are.
Yep.
So, all right. Thanks for joining me on this podcast, Jamie and Jessamy. It was really a great conversation. It's been interesting. Each group has had its own feel, and you guys have your own particular feel to you guys. A good feel. Oh, that sounded funny. That's not what I meant, of course. All right, well, that does it for another episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining us out there in podcast land, and take care of yourself and get good enough sleep. Right?
Yeah.
And take care of other people too, because if we all take care of each other, we can make the world a better place. And thanks for joining me, you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, deserving listeners, I thought I would chime in here at the end of this episode as an addendum. And I will say that if everything went according to plan, the last 3 reruns were interviews with my students. And I recorded these interviews in January of 2014 with 6 different students from a class that I had with them the previous quarter. And I'm recording right now, almost 11 years later, in 2024, toward the end of 2024. And the reason why I want to provide this addendum, I don't normally do this, when I rerun episodes, I usually just rerun them. But I kind of wanted to do a little update on these folks, or at least the ones that I've kept in contact with. So there's a lot I could say, but in a nutshell, with these students, I had future classes with most of them, And in particular with Aaron, who was in the first interview, with Christy, who was in the second interview, and with Jessamy, who was in the third interview, I had them in my internship course where they are toward the end of their graduate school and they're at internship. They're starting to practice. They're volunteering their time, which is a tragedy and arguably illegal to labor. But that's for another topic, I suppose, that I've talked about before. But they are interns, and I'm also their super. So they have an on-site. There's so much to get into. So they have an internship at a site at an agency that is not directly affiliated with the university. So they're working for another organization. But so they have a supervisor on site, but I also supervise them as a professor. And we would meet once a week for 3 hours in a small group format, like 4, 5, 6 interns, and we would talk about their work and their development and their clients and sometimes their personal lives. And Aaron and Christy and Jessamy became good friends in graduate school. And so I think they wanted to be in the same case consultation class. And I had bonded with them quite a bit as well. And even before so in that internship course, it is designed back then anyway. It's not really designed that way anymore. But back then it was designed that when you signed up for your internship course, you stayed in that internship course throughout your internship. And internship would be typically 15 months, but for some, it would be longer. Like for Aaron, because his internship site was screwing around with him and abusing him in a lot of ways, his internship lasted almost 2 years. So that was a whole thing. I was very angry at that internship site and would do everything I could to try to protect Aaron. But anyway, point is that in that class, you get to know each other really well because there's only 5 of you, 6 of you, and I get to know them very well. But even before that, it was at a time with the podcast where I would have these little podcast live recording parties where we would all get together and record. I might have taken a lot of those down because they're pretty shaggy episodes. You know, they don't, they're not very professional, and I don't know how listenable they are because, you know, we're just passing the mic around and everyone's having a glass of wine and that kind of thing. And then we would often go out for karaoke afterwards. You know, it was just a lot of bonding and a lot of good times. And it wasn't all fun and games when these, Aaron and Christy and Jessamy were at internship. There's a lot of dramas that occur, a lot of personal issues come up, a lot of countertransference, a lot of past traumas. It was a lot of processing, similar to the way we talked about in these episodes, these interviews. Then after, and some of them would come on the podcast occasionally. And then after graduation, they all hired me as their supervisor for their private practice. And I stayed in contact with them. It was really great. I got to see them post-graduate. So, point is with Aaron and Christy and Jessamy, there was a lot of years of us having a professional relationship and slowly transitioning into friendships. I would send friends of mine to them. One of my close friends I sent to Aaron because all 3 of them, so I am not fucking joking here. Aaron and Christy and Jessamy are 3 of the best therapists that I've ever met, like hands down. I've met a lot of therapists. I've trained a lot of therapists. I am a therapist. Bob is a therapist. Rebecca's there. Aaron and Christy and Jessamy are 3 of the most compassionate, smart as a fucking whip, those 3, in different ways. And I just so respect their work and respected it early. I mean, I saw it early on, their work. I was just like, whoa, like, where did you 3 come from? So it makes me cry thinking about it, just because they've helped so many people over the last 10 years, so many clients, and they're so dedicated. they're true therapists. And I would see that with students. There would be some that, they're good therapists and they're doing a good job, but they don't live therapy the way that you might hear Rebecca and Bob and I, the way that we talk. It's a different thing. And, it takes all types. There's a wide variety of types of therapists, which is fine. But to me, true therapists talk and think and act and live and sleep and dream a different way. It's a calling. It's a spiritual thing, And these three students, I saw them that way, and they continued to be that way. And so I'd refer a lot of people to them, not only because I just am always trying to encourage my supervisees to be successful, but also I just knew that they were in good hands. Oh, and by the way, I should say that the others that I interviewed, aside from Aaron and Christy and Jessamy, they might also be fantastic therapists, but I just didn't work with them very much after the very beginning of their graduate school experience. So I just can't. I just don't know. I haven't stayed in touch. So I just say that. So I this week was listening to these older episodes to see if they're okay to rerun or if I need to edit anything out. I also reached out to the ones that I could to, just say, hey, how you doing? And so it gave me a chance to talk with them. But Jessamy actually randomly emailed me today. I didn't reach out to her because I hadn't actually listened to her episode yet. I listened to it just now, actually. And she randomly emails me. And so in my timeline, I don't know when this rerun will be reran, but in my timeline, it's August 2024. And I just published yesterday the episode Dr. Kirk's Hubris, in which I pogoed off my head, crashing on my bike. And so Jessamy sends me this wonderful email. I won't read it, but it was a detailed account of how she appreciated me as a mentor. And she remembers, all these little details that I remember as well. And there are certain emails or letters or cards that supervisees, students will give me that are similarly spiritual. Like these messages are, it's funny to say it this way, but they're like monuments to the meaning of my life, if that makes any sense. And so with Jessamy, I was going back and forth her a little bit, and just deeply moved. And I actually put it in my calendar to reread her email every few months because, I don't know, it's inspiring to hear and to realign me, I think, to understand my role, my privilege, my impact, and how all of us can impact others. We don't want to be blindly complimentary with people, but when we can see that, the thing that I read in Jessamy's emails was that I, took the time to see the strengths in her, and took the time to say them, and took the time to convince her that I believed in her and believed in the compliments, and that she remembers that. And I've heard that from a number of students, that there'll be times when I think I'm just having a conversation and randomly saying a nice thing, a true nice thing, but I don't think of it as like a big deal that I'm saying it. I'm just like, oh yeah, you'd be really great at that. You're really smart. And like 10 years later, the student will come to me and say, that one time when you said that, it like really was a nuclear bomb for me. And I'm like, oh my God, like I forget, but it doesn't take me much to remember my own relationships with my mentors or professors and just how every word that they said could build me up or tear me down. So I just have to remember that. And, even with like my wife or people in my family, just remembering that. And it's not just, again, blindly complimenting people, but taking the time to notice and to say and to convince that I believe this stuff, it's a big deal. But I was wondering, because I listened to the first interview episode last week, and I was texting with those guys, and then I listened to the second one, and I talk with Christy anyway, and actually Christy was planning on coming over to socialize. Christy and Stacy are friends as well. And so when Jessamy emailed me out of the blue, I was like, oh, she must know that I'm talking to Aaron and to Christy. But no, that's not why it was coincidence. But Jessamy had listened to the Dr. Kirk's hubris, and I poke off my head. And so I was wondering, I asked her, I was like, did you email me because you listened to my episode yesterday in which I pogoed off my head and you were worried that I would die before you told me these things? And it was kind of a long shot, but I thought this kind of has that ring to it because I'm going through that right now with my mentor, Paul David, who I've had on the podcast before. He has Alzheimer's and he is going to kill himself in a month. He had his living wake last month, and I wanted and have told him a number of things that I want him to take with him to the next dimension, the next phase of life, whatever that is, knowing that he had a huge impact, positive impact on me. And Jessamy's letter to me had that vibe to it. So I asked her, and she said, "Yeah, absolutely. That's why I emailed you, because hearing the you pogoing off your head, it made me realize that you might die at some point, and I want to make sure I tell you these things before." But she also said that she did not know I had been listening to her rerun episode, and she did not know I was communicating a little bit more this past week with Christy and with Aaron. Anyway, it was just kind of interesting. So what can I say in conclusion? Listening to these episodes after almost 11 years, I don't know what it is about my memory, but I tend to think that I and things were worse in the past. The first example that I can remember was I used to think of myself as a pretty bad writer, and I remember when I was like in the 8th or 9th grade, I came across a paper that I had written in the 5th grade, and I opened it up and thought, oh boy, this is going to be pretty bad. And I read it and I thought, oh, actually, that's not nearly as bad as I thought. In fact, it's kind of good. It's not great, but it's certainly 5th grade level. It's fine. And I've had a number of moments like that where I will come upon an old artifact and worriedly open it up or observe it or listen to it and think, oh boy, this is going to be so cringe-worthy. But upon listening to these interviews, I'm like, whoa, actually, we were doing amazing work, and those students were doing amazing work, and things were running pretty smoothly back then. The other thing I want to say is, in these interviews, I asked them why they just, not all of them, but I asked them why they came to Antioch, why they decided to become a marriage and family therapist. And I left that in the rerun because the students get to some pretty interesting things. But I want to say that the program is completely different now. It might be just as good, it might be better, but it's very different. The Antioch University system is very different. The couple and family therapy program at Antioch is very different. But yeah, so in summary, I just loved listening to these reruns and hearing these early students and knowing myself where they went and where they have arrived, and all of the wonderful work that they have done and the wonderful people that they were and are, and the wonderful friendships that they've built, and also the ups and downs of their lives, just normal ups and downs for the three of them. And so it's just so interesting to listen to these interviews. And, I hope it was interesting to you as well. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.